Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Wednesday, and it's February the 1st, starting a new month this month. Um, Very bullish day. This is the daily chart with the envelope. You can see we turned down right off that brown. Once we reach that, anywhere in this area here, we're getting into overbought territory. Severely overbought up here. Doesn't mean we can't keep going higher though, so just don't think that you automatically will turn down. Generally, you do turn down pretty quickly, but not always. I mean, anything can happen here. And this is a huge day. You can see we opened here and we traded way down here before the day was over. I mean, we traded up to here and closed way up here. I mean, that is a huge. Let's just see. Well, I started from the wrong place. Just from the lows of the day to the high of the day. Pull this down so we can see it. I don't know why this is so complicated sometimes. All right, there we go. You can see that's 116 points from high to low, from high to close, almost 100 points, 94. Really big move in day. Of course, it was an FOMC day. There were several other high news items. You can see there was one at 7:15, one around 9, which was the job openings and manufacturing. And then, of course, the biggie, the FOMC. And I think we sold off originally on the FOMC news, but the market rallied soon thereafter. So somebody's buying. Anyway, let's flip over to the intraday chart and see what it looks like. And here we go. And you can see a fairly large chart here with a lot of price action. This looks really tight here. This is not nearly as tight as it looks, simply because this move is so big, and to get it all in there, you have to scrunch the chart up. This was a really big move. We did sell off from that over. We're severely overbought up here. And you can see we sold off fairly strongly, but we were covering some of that now. So, but this was a huge spike in channel up. But the FOMC news came in here. It was a little mixed, and then we sold off. And once we got to down here around 40, 50 again, very similar to where we started from yesterday and rallied, and we rallied on again. So this market continues to march higher. Somebody's still buying it. At some point, this thing's probably going to turn down, but when, I don't know. We can continue to go higher. I just don't. The charts are really mixed. I would have expected to sell off a good while ago looking at the daily chart, but it hadn't happened. And it just keeps going higher, and you can't argue with the market no matter what you think or what you think you're reading. Don't argue with the market. That's one thing you have to learn as a trader, that if your evaluation's wrong, just keep reevaluating, but never argue with it. If the market's going up and you're wanting to go down, don't argue with it, because it can go up much longer than you can ever last. So, and you're just going to lose. So that's one of those mental things that sometimes it's hard to admit when you're wrong. And so if you think the market's going down and it's going up, or if you think the market should go up and it's going down, don't argue with it, because it will burn you big time. So just take what it gives you and go with it. And once you saw this spike in channel, it was mostly buying. I did put a few sales in here because this had played out, this green channel, and we were working sideways. And so there's a few channel trades here. We'll talk about them when we get there. But as you can see, most everything from here, when we made this new low on this breakout, you can see these dash lines here. That's the measured move. And we during the news item, we broke lower, and then we turned down and went lower yet again. And that turned out to be an important low, like I always talk about on these breakouts. And if you could buy this low down here or somewhere in here, this was a huge day for you. And if you catch a runner on a move like this, you can make up for a whole lot of losses. And I'll get people that are break even and they're just scalping, and they don't, they can't get past break even, but they don't try to get runners yet. If you can get to break even as a scalper, you're doing pretty good. Honestly, it doesn't feel like it because you're probably still losing money due to the commissions. But if you can get to break even, you're out trading probably 75 or 80% of the traders, probably more than that, because 90% of traders are losers. And so if you can get to break even and all you're losing is commissions, you're not a bad trader. You're just not quite there yet. You're close. You're knocking at the door. You're just not quite there yet. And if you can learn to get these runners, like I said, if you could get one runner on a day like this, I mean, this is an easy trend to ride out here because it's just straight up. You don't get any real big corrections, so you don't have to get nervous and wonder if you should exit or anything like that. It just keeps going. So even if you just went till you got this first really big bearish bar and exited there on just a single contract, of course, if you could get in somewhere down here near the bottom, I mean, you're looking at almost 50 points of profit on one contract. If you're trading multiple contracts, you're looking at a day where you really mopped up. And so you got to try to get to where you can catch some runners, especially on these failed breakouts and strong trend days and things like that. Yeah, when you're chopping around inside the range, maybe you don't go for runners. But when you get that failed breakout either to the high side or the low side, always think about that there's a good chance that could be an important high or low for the day, and try to get a runner on it if you're trading it. Now, trading these breakouts, failed breakouts is not for everybody. Most of you probably should just watch them. But at some point, you'll get to where you understand what's going on, and if you get a chance to buy it and you get a runner, on that one trade, you may make up a month worth of losses. And that's when your numbers really start to change profit-wise. And then suddenly a break-even trader is very profitable because he made up all his losses on one runner and maybe he made a little profit off another runner or two. And so you don't have those, you're basically erasing your losses. Especially if you're trading at 80 or 90%. You don't have many losses, so it doesn't take much to erase them. One runner might erase 10 losses if you get a good one. I try to tell people that it's really important. And all these blue areas are areas where the red news was today, so you'd want to be out during that period, no trades. So let's zoom in and we'll go through the trade. Early on here, it was clearly a range. And that's pretty common on FOMC days because a lot of people will not commit to buying or selling until after the FOMC news. So I was a little surprised we had this sell-off here. It recovered pretty quickly and then sold off again and made that measured move, perfect measured move to the tick based on the width of this range I had drawn earlier. And then we just kind of chopped. And this is why you don't want to trade almost an hour prior to the news, because a lot of times you'll get into this and go right into the news only trading that much, or only with that kind of movement. You can't get stuck in that, and then the news hit and you'll have to exit before that news and you'll probably take a loser. So don't trade. I mean, there's one trade here that I marked on the second entry at 11:25, but once 12 o'clock hits, don't take any more trades. I'd say an hour before FOMC news. And you can see we had a little movement here, but I would be flat most of the time. But let's go back here to the start of the day. And we had some early news at 7:15, so even if you came in at 7, you just kind of had to sit through that. And then we went into this thing here. I wouldn't trade this. We just came off the lows down here, so the odds are we're going to try to go higher. That's a possibility. It is a lower high with plenty of room to get out. Maybe you take that trade. That would be about the only one I might mark. I would just sit tight. And of course you bounce off the bottom, you're working up, and you get a first entry, pull back second entry. You do get a close outside that green channel, but that's a second entry long. Fairly decent bar. It's not perfect, but I think it does qualify. So maybe you go long there. It's close to being blue. I marked it green just because the signal bar is not perfect and just because this was congestion. But you could look at this as a failed breakout of congestion, and it might be an important low, and you might get a runner there. So, which it does turn out to be, and it runs on up. You get a failed breakout up here, but you're into the news time now. You got to just sit tight. There's the 9 o'clock news, and so by, I would say, 10 till or so, I'd be flat. And you can see it was a pretty good move. It follows the price action, but I don't think you can't take a chance of that, and so you're better off just to be flat, and then you could probably start trading again about here. It just comes down, it bounces, comes back, bounces again. Now you got a triple test right across there, all within about 30 minutes in this range. I like going long there. Got a green channel coming up. You get a break, 2 legs back, so you get another second entry right there. And you could also look, there's like a triple test across there as well. So I like that one. There's a higher low here, but I'm not crazy about it. When it didn't go higher there, here you could run up and turn back down again. It's one you might mark green, but I'd stick. When this one didn't take off on a failed, there's a failed second entry short and a second entry long. I'd be real careful about jumping back in here because it should have taken off there. And you can see even when it got the higher low, it didn't quite get to the high, so the market's kind of bearish right here. I would not go short right here. That's too congested. It's right in the middle of the range, and this just takes off and goes lower, but you can't go short right here. It does tick back here and turn down again on an engulfing bar. I definitely would not go short one tick below that. Maybe since it was engulfing, you figure you could probably get a scalp out of that. But you got to be careful on these breakouts. You do really want to see it test this a couple of times and fail before it goes lower. And it just doesn't do it. It just takes off. And then we're kind of chopping around down here. I don't see a way to get long down here. There is a close outside here and a new low. That's a really big bar to be trying to pick a low when it's mostly sideways. So I would wait here, and you just never really get anything until finally. This is all in one low down. This is like a bottom, and you get a leg up first entry, another leg up second entry that fails, and this actually breaks lower first. It turns up. I like going long when it breaks higher there on the trap. That's a failure. It's a reversal pattern, and you can see it takes off pretty nicely. It didn't end up being a true reversal, but it's where you would expect one, and you can see it traded like a reversal, even though it didn't end up being one because we've made another huge leg down. Again, all sideways in here. I don't see anything to sell. Again, you got to be careful here on that breakout. So unfortunately, there's just no way to really get a safe entry there. That's one you could consider, but I wouldn't take it. It's just too risky going short right there. You do try to go higher one more time right there, right here, but I don't see any entries. And then we get a break. First entry, you try to go higher again, and you get a second entry short. Big bearish bar. You could trade that on the engulfing bar. I don't think I would because it looks a little sideways, but this ends very bearish. If it breaks below that, maybe you go with it. So I like that one to take that trade. And I do want to talk about this one a little more. I went back and forth about whether to make this one green or red. But when you look at this at the far right hand side of the chart, this was a really strong move down, and that's the first break. And with this being a second entry, you would think that you would at least get a scalp, and you figure you'd probably come back down and test this low again. That's what I'd be thinking. And so in real time, I like this as a really strong setup. It's a little congested, but if you understand congestion, that doesn't always matter. In this case, if you listen to your that inner voice saying that's congestion, skip it, you probably would have been right. But because it ends up working, but you had to ride this out a little bit. Depending on how you entered this, probably the ideal way would be to let this break lower to trigger it and then drop your signal bar one tick, or your not your signal bar, I'm sorry, your entry order one tick below there where it really became a second entry. And it would have backed up and filled you and you would have got a quick scalp out of it. Otherwise, you had to kind of ride this out. You would have got it, but you would have had to ride it out. And most people can't ride these out. They would have, by the time it comes back up here and it gets that close to, they'll exit and screw it up and take a loss or whatever. You know, most people can't ride this out and let it play out. So that's why I made that red, because I tried to give you my thinking in real time on it. And in real time, it looks a whole lot different than it does there at the end. Yeah, it is a little congested, but looking at that, you would expect prices to make. I mean, that's a really bearish signal bar too, and it was an engulfing bar. Again, most people shouldn't trade these engulfing bars, and the way I do, if I don't like trading the engulfing bar, which I don't there, I let it. I wait to see what this signal bar does, and I put my sell order right there. Or I consider putting my sell order where it goes, but I may come back and put it one tick below here after it breaks lower and see if it'll back up, which you clearly see it would have backed way up here and filled you. Now, I usually don't try to get too conservative. I just put it where it's supposed to go, which would have been one tick below that bar, because that's where the second entry triggered. And you would have been out all on this first move, and you wouldn't have to ride this out till it made a new low down here. But it works, but I did want to talk about that one because I know people probably wonder about it. And that, I wouldn't have taken anything else here. That takes you into this. You don't want to be stuck in something going into that 12 o'clock. And I mean, I've seen from maybe 11, 11:30 straight into the news look just like this or worse, even tighter than that. So you got to be careful. And nothing in here because of the news. And by this time you were probably okay. And notice here, you got a swing high here. So this is a new swing high. And then you try to go higher once, and you try to go higher twice. So if it breaks below there as a failure, and you've already got one leg down, so you'll probably get another one. I like going short on that trade. I made it green. It's a little aggressive. It is a reversal. I'm sorry, it's not a reversal. It's just a failure. It's a trap, basically, is the way I'm playing. You can tell it traps some traders. Look how strong that goes. And then it actually makes another correction down, but you can't enter anywhere else in here. Then, of course, you do get the break, two legs down to a new low, and you're a little ways away from the MA, and you get that little failed break below here out of that little sideways stuff. That's where you might catch that low. Of course, it does turn out to be the low of the day. It's aggressive, so I made it green. But if you know what you're doing, you want to try to catch these. The safer play is just to wait till you get the reversal. But even then, that's a more advanced trade, and that is a reversal pattern. And you can see it take off this time. This time it truly reverses. And it reverses into a big, huge spike in channel. So if you could catch either one of these, you could have a really nice day. And then, of course, you push up through up here, and you get a first entry, second entry right off the key entry point. You can see you tested that high a couple of times there. I like going long on that second entry. There's another second entry here, but that's too congested. And even this, by the counts, is a second entry, right? Actually, yeah, it's a second entry. Breaks higher, turns down, breaks higher right there. I think somebody asked me about this trade today. But anyway, the signal bar is not good enough. There is a triple test there. 1, 2, 3. If you had a good signal bar, I'd say go long there, but you don't get it. So I'd sit tight. Then you're chopping along. Nothing in here. Here we go again. We start going sideways and then get those buying spurts and then start going sideways. I did mark a short here where normally I wouldn't on a strong trade, because at this point you don't know you have a spike in channel. It just looks like you had a big reversal. But now you got a break outside and two legs to a new high, and look at all that resistance. And you actually have a triple test right here, but that signal bar is not good enough. But when you get this little tiny bar that's like 4 ticks right at the high, I'm going to take that. I mean, you're only risking, maybe 5 or 6 ticks on that, and you might, and if that does turn out to be the high on this trade, after this channel, and we start a new trend down, you're in great shape there. It doesn't turn out to be that. We just keep chopping around. Again, I don't see any longs here. Even though we traded up into this, they would be the more preferred until here. Now you get a breakout, but no setup here, and then you make a lower high with still plenty of room. I like going short there. If this would have been a smaller bar with room, maybe you take it, and then of course you bounce at the low. You get a green bar, take that trade, because we've been bouncing across here all along, and it's been holding. So I like that one. And then, of course, we go back to the top. There's not enough room here on this one, so I didn't mark it. And this time we get a breakout. And that's tempting, and it would have worked. And then when you got another chance, and it's tempting too. I didn't mark them because by the time it got here, it looks a little congested. This one could have at least been green. It's a first breakout. Usually you're better off to wait on a high or low. But this is probably close enough. You could call this a double bottom, and maybe you take that trade. There's plenty of room back. I didn't mark it because it made another, and by that time it looks a lot more congested. There's a higher low here, but I wasn't crazy about it either. It closes below the EMA. Even though you don't worry so much about the EMA on a range, you're more worried about the highs and lows in the midline. So it's another one. Actually, you couldn't because that's an inside bar. That's the reason I didn't mark that. It's got a higher low, because otherwise you might mark that one green. But because it's an inside bar with that higher low, you can't trade that. It doesn't qualify as a signal bar. And we keep running up. That's the first move back to the trend line, and it bounces off of it. And we've talked about it. You can see this is one of those strong trends. The corrections don't even hardly go back but a few ticks. Anything that goes off the trend line with a decent signal bar, you can just about take. This one's close. If it had been a better signal bar, I might have marked it blue, but there's a lot of stem up there, so I did mark it green all the same. And it runs up to the high, and then we start working down. And you got a channel right here with a break, 2 legs to a new low, and it bounces there again. This is very similar to this. It's an inside bar, and otherwise I would have marked that trade. And you could probably still argue for it to be green, but that's a pretty strong move down. And so I'd be a little leery of that one. I'd want to, and the thing is, this bigger trend line, that just sets it. It hadn't been confirmed until over here. And of course, we run up, you come back, and this is basically a higher low off of this, and it does confirm the trend line. You could go long there, and when it comes back here again and bounces off that trend line, you could go long there as well, because this one confirmed it, and this one is just basically a higher low after that. It didn't break lower, but it is a higher low because there's matching lows there. Somebody might ask me, what about a failure here? But it's not. Technically it is a failure by the counts because it's a first entry, second entry, and by the highs it's a first entry and then a second entry when it breaks above there. I wasn't crazy about that signal bar, but you could. It's so late in the day too, but you could consider that trade. So I'll mark it green as well. It turns out to be a great trade, but you don't know that's going to do this ahead of time, and so you got to be careful there. And it's really late in the day, and you can't afford to lose. I mean, if you have a loss early in the morning, you got all day to make it up. But if you have a loss right in here, you're probably done for the day. You don't have time to make it up. So late in the day, you have to get even more picky with your trades because you don't have time to make up a mistake. So always keep that in mind. I love to be done by lunchtime. I love to be done by 10 o'clock. And many days you can be, but definitely by lunchtime. I hardly ever trade after lunch anymore. I'm done by lunch almost almost every day. Very rarely do I take an afternoon trade. Now, if you get a trend like this, and I'm sitting here and I see it, and I see a setup, I'm probably going to take an afternoon trade. But most of the time, I get my trades in the morning. I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm moving on to the other things I need to do every day. So anyway, there it is. Pretty interesting day. Um, really strong trend here at the end of the day. What's going to happen here? If we weren't so severely overbought, I'd say this thing could rally on, and it may rally on anyway. But you got to take into account, based on that daily chart, go back and look at it if you need to, that we are severely overbought. So um, we'll have to see what happens. Doesn't mean we can't go higher though, so don't ever think that can't happen. But it makes it less likely. Um, but anyway, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again tomorrow. Believe it or not, tomorrow's Thursday. We'll come back and wrap up our week and another week behind us. We did start a new month, so we're starting February. Hopefully your January was a good trading month for you. And if it wasn't, hopefully you learned something, a good learning month, and just keep chipping away. This is not, like I said, this is a skill, and it's a skill where you're trading against professionals. If you didn't hear that in the video, I think I talked about it earlier this week. Go listen to it. It's important that you understand that this is, that this is not something doesn't matter how smart you are, how quick you pick up things, whatever. The thing is, this is a skill, and a skill like this is like trying to play a piano or speak a foreign language. The only way you get better at it is through repetition and practice every day for long periods of time. You can't just do it overnight. Sure, there might be one or two people out of, millions, but that could do it. It just comes natural to them. But most of you are not going to be that person, and in fact, almost all of you are probably not going to be that person. So just be prepared. It's a long journey. It's hard work every day, and that repetition, and just getting screen time, and understanding the skill and getting better at it. And it's just like any skill, and you can't just walk in here and do it. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.